Hey, how y'all doing? This is Mongo Slade, and this video is going to be about the sacred space. And I'm going to just basically talk about this concept that is within sort of religious circles. But I'm going to relate it to wrestling because we're going to talk about the Firefly Funhouse and how the Firefly Funhouse is a sacred space. So the first part is the video I'm going to actually explain what a sacred space is, and then I'm going to explain the Firefly Funhouse and what makes it a sacred space. Are you ready? All right, let's go. So first we have to define what the sacred is. Now, most of the book that I'm going to use is called The Sacred and the Profane by Marcia Elaide. And it's a book. It's about sort of about religion, but it's more of like spirituality. And basically what the book says is that the sacred manifests itself. That usually the sacred is something that is for most people is mundane, something that feels ordinary, but it for some reason resonates with us and we transform it as human beings into something that is sacred. So you may think of, some religions may have a sacred rock, or, in some religions like the pre-Christian societies, they may have sacred mountains, or they may have sacred trees, or, things like that. These things become sacred through storytelling and through different things, that experiences that the people have and that they bond over. And these things become almost worshipped in a way. But being sacred is powerful, and that's kind of what we want to talk about here, is that it's a seat of power. So when we see something that's sacred, we see it as being powerful, or at least more powerful or more real than everything around it. So because it's valuable, it has existential value. We usually create that as a fixed point, and then once it becomes a fixed point, or what's called an axis mundi, then we begin to build things around it. So it becomes the center of the universe, or the center of the world. If you read the book, or you read books, you talk about the center of the world, and the center of the world, and we build outward, like you build cities. You start with a capital, and then you build out. Like if you build a nation, you'll have a capital city, and then you'll stretch out. And it's similar, like you drop a rock into a puddle. You may drop a rock into a river or something, and then you'll have the pinpoint where the rock fell, and then all the ripples on the outside. So that would be, you found the sacred space, and then you begin to build things around the sacred space. So if you have a sacred tree, the society might build itself around that sacred tree so they can have access to it. And that's where our world begins to form. And we want to be close to it, because when something is sacred, when we believe that it's powerful, it becomes almost supernatural. So if you need a direct example, think of the church. Like when you see a church is just a building. But for some people, a church is a sacred space. It is where it's God's house. People do prayers as they walk past a church. You can walk on the public street past the church. They don't want you cussing in the church parking lot, because the church itself is holy, but also everywhere that it touches out to a certain point is also holy. So that's kind of the thinking of the sacred space. So the Firefly Funhouse is Bray Wyatt's sacred space, but it's one of his first sacred spaces. It's his second. The first Bray Wyatt sacred space was the cabin that he supposedly grew up in, where Sister Abigail taught him the ways of being a cult leader. And then Randy Orton burned it down. So, that's part of the fun house now. So Bray Wyatt lost his sacred space, he lost his power, he lost his family, he lost everything. And he had to rebuild. And when he had to rebuild, he had to create a new fixed point. He had to create a new center, right? And his new center is the Firefly Funhouse. Now, for a long time, people believe that the Firefly Funhouse is inside Bray Wyatt's mind. And it might be. And there is a lot of good theory that the Firefly Funhouse exists inside of Bray Wyatt's mind. But we also know that it is a physical space within whatever building that they are in that becomes the Firefly Funhouse, because other people have invaded it. Uh, just Seth Rollins has invaded it, Braun Strowman invaded it, uh, Adam Pearce, he showed up in at the Firefly Funhouse. So we know that what goes on. John Cena showed up at the Firefly Funhouse. We know that people can come from outside into the Firefly Funhouse. So it's maybe both a space within Bray Wyatt's mind and a physical space that he takes, sort of a room that he takes over and transforms into the Funhouse. So since whatever view of it you subscribe to, the big point is that Bray Wyatt curates the Funhouse to fit his worldview. Everything about it. So from the pictures on the wall to the puppets, everything has meaning and everything reflects the worldview that Bray Wyatt is trying to convey at the time. So when you first enter, like if you first see the Funhouse, you see it is very childlike. And it's based, of course, on Mr. Rogers and Mr. Dress Up and all these other daytime TV, I guess, I forget, maybe entertainers. I guess that may be the best way to say it. And so why would that be? And you think that to yourself that Bray Wyatt, for a long time, especially when you go back to the days of he's got the whole world in his hands, he's trying to seduce the young. So that's the point of the character, is that he's a corrupter. He's a seducer. So he has this childlike vision. So he does it in a childlike way. So they'd be welcoming the children as he tries to lure. He's sort of the Pied Piper. He's trying to lure the children down a bad path. But there's also a second reason. It's because Bray Wyatt is trying to be a nice guy now. Since he's trying to be nice, he wants his new world to reflect his new nice attitude. That's why he wears a sweater, he wears the slacks, he looks very non-threatening, and he waves a lot, smiles a lot, kind of like a neighbor. If you ever saw I forget what movie that is. It's a Jim Carrey movie. But I think it might be the movie where the entire world was curated around him. I forget what it's called, but he was very nice to his neighbors and everybody was nice to him. Hey, how you doing? That's kind of how Bray Wyatt is trying to get across. He's trying to get across that he's just your nice guy neighbor. And, which is, of course, a facade. Everything about, it's a facade. And you can just look at all the different things that is within the Funhouse that sort of shows that it's a facade, that is actually a dangerous place. So, of course, Bray Wyatt put pictures of his victims on the wall, for a long time. I think that over time, they kind of toned down some of the things that they were doing. But it was pretty obvious, like when they had Finn Balor and Kane and Kurt Angle and Daniel Bryan and all those guys on the wall. All those guys had been attacked by the Fiend. And that was sort of the Fiend having a checklist of all the people who had wronged Bray Wyatt before and him getting revenge. So he would, he attacked Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns goes on the wall with the X's over his eyes. So that's kind of one thing. Another picture that he has is the burning cabin. The burning cabin is on the wall. So, that's the old sacred space. That's just something to remind him of what could happen if he slips again, if he fails to maintain control over his power, over his enemies and his opponents. He could lose the Funhouse again. And then, of course, you have the puppets, and all of the puppets, they stand for different things. Now, I'm recording this on September the 11th, which is the day that Wobbly Walrus debuted. But we're going to get to Wobbly Walrus last. We want to talk about all the different puppets. So obviously Mercy the Buzzard, right? So Mercy is based off Waylon Mercy, which was one of the first WWF characters to have like the Hawaiian shirts and be sort of a cult leader. A lot of people say that Bray Wyatt kind of took pieces of that when he created his character. And that's true. And that's why he named the bird Mercy. But you also had the Buzzard because, their catchphrase for a long time was follow the buzzards. So that kind of makes sense. And then you will have Huskus the Pig Boy. So Huskus the Pig Boy is obviously his days from Husky Harris when he was in the Nexus. This is like a pre-Bray Wyatt thing. And this is also why Huskus is always getting bullied because, he kind of felt like he always gets messed with for being chunky, for being fat. And if you remember the workout thing that he did, Muscle Man dance with Vince McMahon, that was basically a representation of how he was treated when he was in the Nexus, that he was fat and that he needed to lose weight and that he needed to, get himself together. And so that's what that represents. It represents Husky Harris, and it represents his problem with his weight. Then you have Rambling Rabbit. So what Rambling Rabbit represents is the promos of the Eater of Worlds. So when Bray Wyatt first came in, his promos were kind of sinister. They were short, they were sweet, they were kind of to the point, but they were almost Ultimate Warrior-like in how they were difficult to follow. And by the time he was the full Eater of Worlds, Bray Wyatt, who walked around with the butcher's apron, he was almost unintelligible at times, where you really could not understand where the hell he was going with a promo. And because of that, people used to say he was rambling, that he was rambling, he wasn't saying anything. Even though some of those promos were very fucking good, they were just very cryptic. And because of that, he kind of got the reputation for rambling. So that's where you get the Rambling Rabbit from. And of course, Abby the Witch is based off Sister Abigail, who is Bray Wyatt's mentor, who taught him the dark arts and all of this other metaphysical mumbo jumbo. And he has to have a physical representation of her in the Funhouse. So of course, then you also have the Evil Boss. The Evil Boss, which of course represents Vince McMahon, is the person who kind of comes in to make sure that Bray stays on track, that chastises him when he's doing things the wrong way or when he's going off the wrong path. Constantly, like the sword of Damascus hanging over his head at all times, making sure that he needs to make money, he needs to do this, he needs to do that. And this brings us to Wobbling Walrus, because it is the Evil Boss that introduces Wobbly Walrus into the Funhouse. So we know that the Evil Boss has the ability to force things into the Funhouse. And now Wobbly Walrus is here. So Wobbly Walrus comes along, and the Evil Boss, which is of course Vince McMahon with the devil horns, Devil Vince as they call him sometimes on the internet, he says that you can't handle the responsibility of running the Funhouse by yourself. So what does this mean? This is sort of the same thing that Roman Reigns told him, right? When Roman Reigns beat him, or when Roman Reigns attacked him at SummerSlam, or attacked the Fiend at SummerSlam, because we're supposed to believe that the Fiend and Bray Wyatt are two different people. So when the Fiend was attacked, he was told, you can't handle this responsibility. And now we're seeing that Bray Wyatt needs to have somebody to hold his hand, and somebody who is going to make sure that he, teach him about responsibility, teach him how to be mature or be on the right side of things. And this is, of course, Wobbly Walrus, who has been installed by the Evil Boss to teach Bray Wyatt responsibility. Obviously, that's Paul Heyman, right? So Paul Heyman is being sent to SmackDown now to teach Bray Wyatt about responsibility. And through this, he ended up taking the title he helped Roman Reigns take the title. So now, if you want to say that the Firefly Funhouse is inside Bray's mind, then you can see that maybe Paul Heyman's interference, that maybe Paul Heyman's manipulations of Roman Reigns is now on Bray Wyatt's mind. Or you could take it as Bray Wyatt wanted to start mocking Paul Heyman because Roman Reigns, he's now involved with Roman Reigns. So you could take it either way, but I'm really interested in what's going on. It's a fun story to break down when you look at it, how it is. You can break everything down, man. And I really I'm a writer, so I really kind of overthink things. I also try to look for different connections and stuff like that. That's also why I read books like The Sacred and Profane. But this is just kind of one of the archetypal things that I think about, because the sacred and profane obviously is just good and evil. There's good things, there's evil things. Just like there's sacred trees, there may be cursed trees. There may be a cursed, some things are just trees, right? But there you also have bad luck areas. Like, Africa would have like what they might call the bad bush, where, areas where people go in and they get lost, or they go in and they get eaten by wild animals or something like that. So it becomes cursed and they don't want to go there anymore. There's actually stories of like Africans trying to lure Europeans into the bad bush, because they would be like, oh shit, if we can get them into the bad bush, the bush will kill them and we don't have to deal with them anymore. Of course, it didn't work, but it's based off of societal beliefs. So if you believe something is sacred and you're taught that it's sacred your whole life, or you taught that it's cursed, then you sort of begin to roll with it. But I'm just going off the subject. All right, so thank you guys for listening. Like this video, share it, subscribe. Let me know where you think this is going as far as Wobbly Walrus and Alexa Bliss, which I did not bring into this yet because she has not come into the Funhouse yet, but I do think she is going to come. She is going to end up in the Funhouse eventually. But let me know what you guys think, and hit the bell for notifications, like this video, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace. Make sure to leave a comment too.